What most people don't realize is that there's a profound difference between doing and being. In the modern world, we are so conditioned to believe that our worth comes from how much we accomplish, how busy we stay, and how productive we appear. There's a deep, unconscious belief that the more we do, the more valuable we become. But this belief is rooted in the ego. It is the ego that constantly seeks validation through achievement, always striving, always chasing, always fearing that if we were to stop doing, even for a moment, we might disappear. But you see, true power, real aliveness, doesn't come from doing more. It arises when you become present, when you stop being consumed by activity and instead allow yourself to simply be. There is something far more vital, far more transformative that happens when you come into contact with that quiet space within you, where doing ceases and awareness begins. When you are fully present, when you're not lost in the next task, the next project, the next desire, but instead completely rooted in this moment, you begin to tap into a dimension that is deeper than thought. That dimension is being, and it's not something you have to attain. It's what you already are. But because we've become so entangled in doing, in performing, in managing the outer world, we've lost touch with it. Doing is necessary, of course. Life on the level of form requires action. But the mistake is when doing becomes compulsive, when it's no longer in service of awareness, but instead an escape from it. We run from silence, we run from stillness. We fill every moment with noise, with motion, with mental commentary, with distraction. Why? Because stillness reveals, and what it reveals is the space where your identity is no longer constructed by the mind. In the absence of compulsive doing, you begin to feel an inner spaciousness. That's the state of being. It is peaceful, it is not rushed, it doesn't crave an outcome, it is deeply intelligent but quiet. And from that space, action may still arise, but it's no longer noisy, anxious, or forced. It flows. It aligns with life rather than trying to control it. When your life is rooted in being, your actions are no longer mechanical reactions to external pressures. They are not driven by fear or ego or the need to prove yourself. Instead, they become an extension of presence. The doing is no longer separate from your awareness. It emerges from it. And when that happens, even the smallest, most ordinary tasks become sacred. You are no longer doing something in order to get somewhere else. You are simply present with what is. There is immense power in this, because most people live in a state of disconnection. They are disconnected from themselves, from life, from others, because they are always on the move, always trying to get somewhere else. But being brings you back to what is real. It brings you back to the now. And the now is not a stepping stone to the future. It is not a waiting room. It is the place where life actually unfolds. If you are not present here, then you are not truly living. You are merely existing in the dream of the mind. Many people confuse presence with passivity. They think that if they were to stop striving, stop pushing, stop constantly doing, they would become stagnant. But the opposite is true. When you access being, you are no longer bound by the limitations of the egoic mind. You become receptive to something deeper. Intuition begins to guide you. Creativity flows more effortlessly. Decisions become clearer, not because you thought harder, but because you listened more deeply. When you're constantly doing, your attention is fragmented, you're scattered. You're pulled in many directions, but being gathers your attention, it centers you, and in that centeredness you become aligned with life itself. There is a natural intelligence in life, and when you are present, you can sense it. You can move with it instead of against it. Doing in of itself is not the problem. The problem is when doing becomes your identity, when your sense of self depends on how much you produce or how successful you appear to others. Then you're trapped in a cycle that never ends. Because no matter how much you achieve, it will never be enough. The mind will always want more. But when you live from being, even in the midst of action, there is a deep sense of enoughness. You are not chasing wholeness, you are living from it. This is not a theory. It's a direct experience. You can feel it. Even now, just take a moment. Let the thinking subside. Let the desire to get dissolved where. Just for a second, what is in our liveness? There's a presence. That's being. It's always been there, underneath the noise, beneath the doing. But we overlook it because we're too busy searching outside. The greatest shift in your life doesn't happen by achieving something new. It happens when you realize what was already here unnoticed. That simple shift from doing to being changes the entire quality of your experience. It brings a quiet joy, a deep peace, a sense that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. And once you've tasted that stillness, even for a moment, you begin to see life differently. You're no longer chasing moments, you're inhabiting them. You're no longer rushing through life. You're arriving fully in each step. You become a presence in the world rather than a performer in it. Let your life flow from being. Let doing arise naturally, not as a way to escape, but as an expression of presence. That's where true fulfillment begins. So often we build our entire identity around what we do, around our job, our title, our achievements, our roles in the world. I am a doctor. I am a teacher. I am a parent. I am successful. I am a failure. And these labels become the way we define ourselves. We invest so much of our sense of self into the roles we play that we begin to believe that if those roles were taken away, we would no longer exist. But that is an illusion. What you do is not who you are. And the moment you begin to realize this, a deep inner shift starts to happen. The world teaches you to strive, to prove yourself, to become someone. From childhood, the message is loud and clear: to achieve something, and you will be worthy. But this message is rooted in fear. It's rooted in the idea that as you are now, you are not enough. So you begin to chase identity through performance. You try to become someone in the eyes of the world, hoping that this recognition will finally bring peace. But peace never comes that way, because any identity that is built on form, on status, on achievement, on how others see you, is fragile. It can be taken away. And if it can be taken away, that is not truly who you are not your resume. You are not your social role. You are not the story your mind keeps telling you about who you are. These things are temporary. They belong to the surface of your life. But beneath that surface, there is something deeper, something untouched by success or failure, praise or criticism. There is a presence within you that has always been there. Before you had a career, before you had goals, even before you had a name, that is your true self. And to discover it, you have to let go of the belief that your value depends on what you do. This is not to say that doing is unimportant. Of course, life involves roles and responsibilities. But the key is not to confuse the role with the reality. You may play the role of a leader, a healer, an artist, but you are not the role. The role is something you temporarily inhabit. You can perform it with excellence, with dedication, with presence. But when the role ends, the essence of who you are remains untouched. When you know that, you begin to move through the world with a new kind of freedom. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer depend on outer approval for your sense of worth. You begin to do things not because they add to your identity, but simply because they feel aligned with who you are. And in that space, your actions become lighter, freer, more authentic. You're not trying to become anyone. You're simply expressing what already is. The ego is always trying to construct an identity based on doing. It says, look what I've done, or look what I still need to do. But the more you try to find yourself through what you do, the more disconnected you become from being. Because being is not something you achieve, it is something you recognize. It is already here. It's the silent awareness behind every experience, the stillness beneath every role, the aliveness that doesn't need a label. When you begin to detach from the mental image of yourself, you may feel vulnerable at first. If you're not your job, not your achievements, your reputation, then who are you? That question may feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges the foundation you've built your sense of self on. But if you stay with it, if you allow that question to lead you inward, you begin to sense something far, far more real than any outer identity. You begin to feel the depth of presence itself. And in that presence, there's no need to be anyone special because there's no lack. No need to impress, no need to defend, no need to become. There is only the peace of what is. What often drives the compulsion to achieve and perform is the fear of being nobody. The fear that without accomplishments, you might be invisible, but invisibility to the ego is not death, it's liberation. Because when you no longer need to be somebody, you become available to the moment. You become free to breathe, to feel, to simply be. And in that freedom, something remarkable happens. You begin to discover a natural joy that isn't dependent on outcomes. A joy that comes not from being recognized, but from being real. This is not about abandoning responsibility or giving up ambition. It's about no longer deriving your identity from those things. You can still create, still serve, still move in the world, but now you do it from a place of inner fullness, not inner lack. You are no longer chasing completeness through doing. You are living from the completeness that is already present within you. And ironically, when you stop seeking your identity through doing, your actions often become more effective because they are no longer distorted by fear, by the need for validation, by the pressure to prove something. They come from clarity, from stillness, from truth. Try just for a moment to imagine who you are without your story, without your name, job, your past, your future. Who are you without the roles, without the labels, without the constant mental commentary? If you allow that question to sink in, you might begin to feel the quiet presence that remains. That's not nothing. That's the essence of who you are. And it's always been there, waiting to be recognized. Once you've touched that space, the world no longer defines you. Success and failure lose their grip. Praise and blame lose their power. You can walk into any room, do any task, speak to anyone, not from a place of performance, but from presence. And that presence is not loud or dramatic, it's still, it's grounded, it's deeply alive. You are not what you do. You are the awareness in which all doing arises. So often people try to force action. They believe they must always be moving, planning, fixing, achieving. There's a constant inner tension, a sense that if they're not doing something, they're falling behind or losing control. But what they don't realize is that most of this doing is not coming from a place of clarity or stillness. It's coming from restlessness, from fear, from the ego's incessant drive to feel significant. And as long as action arises from that place, it will always be tainted by anxiety, by struggle, by a sense of never enough. There is another way, a deeper way, a way of allowing doing to arise from being, not as something separate from it, but as a natural extension of it. When you are deeply present, when you are rooted in the stillness of now, action doesn't stop. It simply changes in quality. It becomes lighter, more efficient, more in harmony with life. There is no longer that frantic grasping or the exhausting effort to make something happen. Instead, doing flows. The mind loves to plan. It wants to manage everything, predict outcomes, ensure success. But most of the time, this planning is disconnected from the present moment. It is driven by the fear of what might happen if things don't go a certain way. And so people act out of resistance. Resistance to what is, resistance to uncertainty, resistance to failure. But when you're in resistance, your actions reflect that. Even if you appear calm on the surface, the energy behind what you do carries tension, carries struggle. Now imagine what it's like to act without resistance, to allow the moment to unfold and to respond from a place of openness. That is what happens when doing arises from being. There is no longer the need to push or pull against life. Instead, there is a sense of alignment, as if life itself is carrying you forward rather than you dragging yourself through it. When you live in this state, decisions become clearer. You don't have to overthink or analyze endlessly. There is an inner knowing, a quiet confidence that emerges from presence. You're not reacting, you're responding. You're not forcing, you're allowing, and yet you are fully engaged, fully alive. People often ask, but if I stop pushing, won't I lose my motivation? Won't I become passive? No, true action, the most powerful kind of action, does not come from pressure or mental noise. It comes from stillness. That may sound paradoxical, but it's deeply true. When you're present, when you are free from the compulsive need to prove something or avoid something, a natural intelligence begins to move through you. That intelligence is not yours personally. It is the same intelligence that moves the stars, grows the trees, beats your heart. When you are connected to it, you don't lose motivation. You gain clarity. You don't lose direction. You move with greater purpose, with less effort. But to access that kind of doing, you must first be willing to stop. You must allow yourself to rest in being, even if just for a few moments. To feel the stillness beneath the movement, the silence beneath the noise. Only from there can true action arise, not driven by fear, but guided by awareness. Think about how often we act just to escape stillness. We check our phones, send messages, start projects, all because we're uncomfortable with just being. But that kind of doing is not creative. It's compulsive. And compulsive doing always leads to exhaustion, to burnout, to a feeling that life is slipping away no matter how much we accomplish. When doing arises from being, there is no burnout because you're not trying to uphold a false sense of self. You are not performing. You are expressing. You're not chasing outcomes. You are participating in the unfolding of the moment. Even in the middle of business, there can be stillness within. You can act, speak, move, and create while remaining deeply rooted in presence. That's where grace begins to flow through what you do. This doesn't mean you'll always know what to do in every moment. Sometimes clarity comes slowly, sometimes it requires waiting. But that waiting is not passive. It is alert. It is attentive. It's a space where you remain open without rushing to fill it. And then when the time is right, the right action arises, not from the mind's urgency, but from the stillness of being. So allow yourself to pause. Even now, allow the space between thoughts. Notice the stillness that is always here underneath the surface of your life. That space is not empty. It is full of intelligence. And when you rest in that space, you don't have to struggle to make things happen. You begin to listen to life rather than trying to shout over it. And when you do act, you are no longer trying to reach some distant future moment where everything will finally be okay. You are acting from a place where everything is already okay. There is no longer a sense that the next task will complete you, because you are already whole. From that holiness, action becomes joyful. It becomes effortless. Even if the task is difficult, there is an ease beneath it, because you are not resisting. It's important to recognize this difference in your own life. Notice when your actions are driven by fear, by anxiety, by a need to control. And also notice the moments when action flows easily, naturally, without inner strain. Those moments are glimpses of doing arising from being. Let them expand, let them guide you. In time, you begin to live from that space more often. Not as an ideal, but as a natural rhythm. You are no longer at war with the moment. You are not trying to impose your will on life. Instead, you become a co-creator with life, moving with it, responding to it, participating in it, fully, deeply, without separation that you're doing arise from being. Let every action be an expression of presence. There is a common misunderstanding that stillness is some kind of void, a lifeless emptiness, a space where nothing happens. Many people fear it, they think. If I become still, won't I become passive, dull, unproductive? But that idea comes from the mind, a mind that has been conditioned to value noise, movement, and activity above all else. In truth, stillness is not the absence of life. It is the presence of a deeper life, a more profound intelligence that cannot be found thought or mental effort. Stillness is not something you create. It's something you uncover. It's already there, beneath the surface noise of your thoughts, beneath the constant pull of your to-do lists, beneath the roles you play. It's always been there, quietly waiting for you to notice it. You don't need to earn it. You don't need to figure it out. You simply need to become still enough, quiet enough to allow it to reveal itself. In that stillness, you begin to notice something extraordinary. A spaciousness, a sense of presence, a gentle alertness. It's not sleepy or vague. It's alive. And in that space, there's a feeling of completeness. You are no longer reaching, no longer grasping. There's nothing missing, nothing lacking, nothing that needs to happen for this moment to be whole. When the mind is very active, when it's chasing the future or clinging to the past, you're pulled out of the present moment. You become fragmented. You live on the surface of life, always slightly removed from what is actually here. But when you enter stillness, even for a brief moment, something opens. You feel more connected, more real, more alive, not because of something you've done, but because you've stopped doing long enough to experience what's always been here. People are often surprised by the depth of peace they feel when they become still. It's as if a great burden falls away, the burden of constantly having to think, to plan, to do. And in that space, they realize something essential, that peace is not something they need to find outside of themselves. It's not somewhere in the future. It's not dependent on external conditions. It is already within them. Stillness simply allows them to remember it. Stillness is also where clarity arises. When you are still, the noise of the mind settles. Thoughts lose their urgency. The chatter slows down. And in that quiet, something deeper begins to speak. Not in words, but in knowing. You start to sense what is truly important. You see situations more clearly. You feel more in tune with the flow of life. Action, when it arises from that space, is more aligned, more effective, and more compassionate. There is also beauty in stillness. Not the kind of beauty that you look at from the outside, but an inner radiance. A gentle joy that is not loud or dramatic. It is subtle, like the quiet light of early morning. You don't need to explain it, you just feel it. It is the joy of simply being. The joy of not needing to be anyone else, not needing to be anywhere else. Just this, just now. In the modern world, this kind of stillness is rare. Everything encourages motion, stimulation, distraction. People are constantly checking, scrolling, reaching, reacting. Even when they sit still physically, their minds are racing. But the invitation is to step out of that stream, even if just for a moment, to allow the mind to quiet down, to let go of the need to manage everything, to be still, not as a technique, but as a return to your natural state. This stillness is not separate from life. It's not something you have to retreat to a mountaintop to find. It's not outside your daily existence. You can bring it into any moment, into a conversation, a walk, a cup of tea. The moment you stop and bring your attention fully to what is, stillness is there. It was never gone, only overlooked. It's important to understand that stillness is not the opposite of activity. You can be very active and still be rooted in stillness. In fact, some of the most powerful actions arise from this state. When you act from stillness, there is a quiet confidence in what you do. You're not trying to prove yourself. You're not rushing. You're not chasing. You simply respond to life from a place of depth. Think of a tree. It grows silently. Its roots go deep into the earth. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't strive. And yet is powerful, strong, and life-giving. Stillness is like that. It grounds you. It stabilizes you. It connects you to something larger than yourself. And when storms come, as they inevitably do, you are not thrown about by them. You are centered, anchored, present. Stillness is also the space in which healing happens. When you stop running, stop resisting, and simply allow yourself to be with what is, you begin to feel things you may have been avoiding. Old pain, old fears, old patterns may arise. But in the space of stillness, they are met not with judgment or resistance, but with awareness. And in that awareness, they begin to dissolve. Not because you forced them to go, but because they were held in a space that allowed them to lose their power. This is the gift of presence, the gift of being. It allows you to experience life through the filter of thought, but directly, with your whole being. And in that experience, there is a kind of simplicity, a return to what is essential. You don't need to be impressive. You don't need to perform. You don't need to carry the whole world when you just need to be. When you make space for stillness in your life, even a little, you begin to feel more at home in yourself. You're not constantly running from one thing to the next. You're not trapped in the mind's endless commentary. You're alive. And that is enough. Stillness is not empty. It is full, full of life, full of presence, full of the richness of the moment. Let it be your foundation. Let it be your home. Let it be the place from which your life flows. There is a kind of suffering that most people carry with them every day without even realizing it. It comes from being trapped in time, not clock time, but psychological time. This suffering is the result of living the memory of the past or the anticipation of the future. The mind constantly replays what has happened or projects what might happen, creating stories, judge fears, regrets. And in doing so, it robs you of what is always available but rarely noticed, the present moment. Most people are so entangled in their personal past that they believe they are defined by it. They carry around an identity that is built entirely on what has happened to them. They have done what they have failed to do. And every time the mind drifts into the past, whether it's through guilt, shame, nostalgia, or anger, it reinforces that identity. It says, this is who I am this story. But the past is not who you are. The past is a collection of thoughts, interpretations, and memories that exist only in your mind. It has no power on its own. It is only when you give it your attention, when you identify with it, that it seems to become real. And then there's the future. The endless stream of what-ifs, the constant worrying, the endless planning, the belief that something needs to happen for you to finally be okay. The future becomes a kind of promised land, always just out of reach. When I finish this, when I achieve that, when I meet the right person, when I'm finally successful, then I will feel peace. But that moment never comes, because the future, like the past, doesn't exist. It is a mental projection, a concept. It's not real life. Life is now. When you are lost in time, in either direction, you are not really living. You're thinking about life. You're dreaming about it. You're commenting on it, but you're not in direct contact with it. And this creates a gap, a painful separation between you and the living moment. In that gap, all kinds of suffering arise. Fear, stress, anxiety, resentment, longing. These emotions are not caused by what is happening now. They are caused by your resistance to what is, or your attachment to what was or what might be. But there is a way to step out of that cycle, a way to return to the simplicity and peace of the present. It begins by realizing deeply that the now is all you ever have, not as a concept, but as a living reality. This moment, this sensation, this stillness is the only place where life actually unfolds. Everything else is a mental overlay. When you bring your full attention to the now, something shifts. You begin to feel more spacious, more grounded. You are no longer pulled by the momentum of past or future. You come into alignment with what is real. And in that alignment, healing happens. The past, no matter how heavy, begins to lose its grip on you because you are no longer feeding with your attention. You are no longer giving it the energy of identification. You can acknowledge what happened, of course. You don't have to deny it, but you don't have to carry it either. You realize that the pain of the past is not happening now. It only lives in the mind's narrative. And when you stop rehearsing that narrative, when you stop defining yourself by it, the emotional charge begins to dissolve. Similarly, the anxiety of the future begins to fade because you recognize that worrying about something that hasn't happened is not useful. It doesn't prepare you. It only exhausts you. Real preparation for the future happens by being fully present now. The quality of your presence now determines the quality of what unfolds later. So instead of projecting yourself endlessly into what might come, you ground yourself in what is. You trust that from presence, the right action will arise when needed. There is such relief in this, such peace. You don't need to resolve the entire story of your life. You don't need to have every answer. You don't need to fix everything or know what's coming next. All you need is to show up here now with your full attention. And from that space, life becomes less complicated. You begin to respond to life rather than react to it. You begin to meet each moment as it comes without dragging the weight of yesterday or the fear of tomorrow into it. This doesn't mean you lose your memory. It doesn't mean you stop making plans. Memory and planning have their place, but only when they arise from presence. You can remember the past without being defined by it. You can plan for the future without being consumed by it. When you are rooted in being, you use time when needed, but you are no longer used by time. You're not lost in it. You're not trapped by it. There's a profound freedom in this, because the present moment is always fresh. It is untouched by the past. It is unburdened by the future. It doesn't need fixing. It simply is. And when you enter it fully, you begin to see things more clearly. You hear more deeply. You feel more alive. Even your sense of self begins to soften. You no longer need to hold on to your story so tightly. You no longer need to protect your image or your history. You are here now, and that is enough. People often carry emotional pain for years because they have never fully allowed themselves to be present with what is. But the truth is, most emotional pain cannot survive in the light of presence. When you bring awareness to it without resistance, it begins to dissolve. Not because you forced it to go, but because you stopped feeding it with mental narratives. You brought it into the now. In the now, there is space. There is compassion. There is healing. So make it a practice to return to the moment again and again. Notice when your mind drifts into the past or rushes into the future. Don't judge it. Just bring it back. Anchor your attention in what is here, in the breath, in the sounds around you, in the stillness beneath all things. And from that place, meet your life. Not as a concept, not as a problem, but as a living presence. Let the past be what it was. Let the future unfold as it will. Let this moment be your home. There is something quite profound that is often overlooked, and yet it speaks so clearly through the very language we use. We don't call ourselves human doings. We call ourselves human beings, and yet look at how we live, constantly caught up in doing, achieving, fixing, accumulating, trying to become something more, trying to get somewhere else. It's as if we've forgotten the essence of what we are. We become so identified with activity, with performance, with motion, that the quiet power of simply being has been lost. The modern world is structured entirely around doing. From a very young age, you're asked, what will you do when you grow up? And then when you grow up, the question becomes, what are you doing now? And the answer to that question seems to carry your value. You become someone based on what you've done, what you own, what title you hold, how busy you are. But all of this is form. It's external. It's not who you are in essence. And when doing becomes the foundation of your identity, there's always a deep restlessness within, a quiet sense of lack, a subtle feeling that no matter how much you do, it's never quite enough. That feeling is not a flaw. It's not something to be fixed. It's a signal, a message pointing you back to the truth that you've lost touch with your being. You see, doing is not the problem. The problem is identifying with doing. When you think you are only what you do, you become disconnected from the deeper dimension of yourself. the one that does not come and go, the one that is always here, beneath all activity. Being is not something abstract, it is not a vague spiritual concept, it is the simple, clear sense of presence, the awareness that remains when you are no longer striving to become anything else. It is the spaciousness in which thoughts, emotions, and actions appear. It is what allows you to witness your experience without being entirely lost in it. But most people are never taught to rest in being. In fact, they are taught to fear it, to sit still, to do nothing, to simply be. These things are seen as unproductive, even lazy. There's this constant pressure to be doing something, to be busy, to have something to show for your time. But the truth is, some of the most important moments in your life come not from what you do, but from how deeply you are present when you do it. When your identity is rooted in being, your doing takes on a different quality. It is no longer driven by the compulsion to prove yourself. It is not fueled by fear or by the need to gain approval or success. It flows more naturally, more peacefully. There's a deep intelligence that moves through you, guiding your actions, but without the inner noise. There is clarity. There is focus. There is effort, yes, but not struggle. The more you return to being, the more you discover a quiet joy that is not dependent on anything outside of you. It's not the kind of happiness that comes from achieving a goal or acquiring something. It is more subtle than that. It is the joy of being fully alive, fully here, of realizing that this moment, exactly as it is enough. You don't need to be more. You don't need to get somewhere else. You don't need to perform. And it's from that space of being that true transformation happens, not by adding more layers to yourself, but by shedding what you are not. Letting go of the roles, the expectations, the striving, all the noise that covers up the quiet aliveness of now, you begin to feel the simplicity of existence again, the peace of just breathing, the miracle of being conscious. This doesn't mean you stop acting in the world. It means you act from a place of depth, from groundedness. You bring presence into whatever you do. Whether you're washing dishes or creating something meaningful, there's no hierarchy. Each act becomes an expression of the same stillness, the same awareness. That's what it means to live from being. And when challenges arise, and you meet them from that same space, you're not thrown around by every emotion, every thought, every reaction. There's a still point within you that remains untouched, no matter what is happening around you. That's the power of being. It gives you stability, clarity, and strength, not because you're controlling everything, but because you've stopped identifying with the part of you that needs to control. In being, there is no need to constantly define yourself. You're not seeking identity through action. You're not measuring your value based on what you achieve. You already are. You exist. You are aware, and in that you find your freedom. This also changes how you relate to others. When you are rooted in being, you no longer see others through the filter of judgment or comparison. You see them more clearly, more compassionately, not as roles or as problems to fix, but as expressions of the same life. There is space for connection, for silence, for presence. Real relationship becomes possible only when two beings meet in the present, not when two minds try to get something from each other. Many people ask, what is my purpose? But the deeper question is not what you should do. It's how you are in this moment. Are you present? Are you aware? Are you alive to the miracle of being? When you live from that space, purpose arises naturally. You don't have to figure everything out in your head. Life begins to unfold through you effortlessly, not without challenge, but without the inner resistance that makes everything feel so heavy. The most beautiful thing is, you don't need to go anywhere to discover this. You don't need to achieve anything. You don't need to become someone else. All you need to do is notice what is already here, the awareness that sees, the stillness that hears, the silence between the thoughts. That is being. It's not far away, it's here before you try to be anything else. So in a world obsessed with doing, remember who you are. Return again and again to the stillness within, not to escape life, but to live it more fully. You are not a human doing, you are a human being. Let your life reflect that truth.